Hello, it's Graham Cove with another Wow Ergonomics. You know it's Wow Ergonomics because it's this time and at this place every Friday. So you should be used to it by now. I hope you're well wherever you are and whatever it is that you're doing. And welcome to everybody on LinkedIn. Welcome to everybody on Twitter. Welcome to everybody on YouTube. Doesn't matter where you're watching it. It's still the same information. If you're watching this back at some point, hope you're driving safely or whatever it is you're doing as well. I've got two wonderful guests for you today. Stephen, as you notice, is only here in spirit. There he is down at the bottom. He's out and about being busy today. I think he's recycling Prime bottles or something like that. So very important work. But don't worry. We're still going to have the same quality level of conversation. I'm going to remove this from around us so that I can bring the guests in. First of all, please welcome the wonderful Katie Elliott. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello. Hi, Graham. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And also here's Cecile. Thank you, Cecile. And here we are. Everybody's like, oh, it's Friday. I'm going to bring the energy up. I'm going to make sure everybody's really energized, etc. before we go this. Now, let's start with who you are, because some people on this program may never have encountered you before. Other people who are watching in the audience will go, I know exactly who that is, but we'll start with Katie at the top. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Katie with the business HRKT. I've gone for the Ron Seal approach of naming my business. I specialise in helping startups and scale up businesses with their HR and talk about how it's not actually that scary to talk to your employees, how you actually can go about talking to your employees, and share lots of content here on LinkedIn and over on Instagram as well about being an employer, being a small business, and working with your team to keep everyone as happy as possible.
That's always the thing in life, isn't it? Trying to keep people happy.
Keep people happy, yeah.
Yeah. As my guest on My Music said this morning, people are complicated, aren't they?
Yes. Yes. My job is made very, very interesting by people, largely.
So we'll probably come on to that in a minute. Yeah. Cecile.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah. Now tell us, first of all, where are you coming from?
Norway.
Oh. The wonderful Norway. You see how global we are on this program. What's it like in Norway at the moment? It's dull and grey here in the UK today. It's not a great day. You know, we had all of that beautiful sunshine for Glastonbury, etc. last week, and now, you know, the sun has disappeared for a while. What is Norway grey today?
Norway is great. Norway is rainy and grey and cold. And I just had a birthday party for my 4-year-old last night, and like within 5 minutes of everyone leaving, it just started pouring down.
Oh,
and it hasn't stopped since. So,
well, tell us a bit about you. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
I'm Cecilie. I'm a Dopamine Detox Coach, which it sounds like a big, scary thing to a lot of people because I don't think everyone understands exactly what it is. And I get it. What I do in simple terms is taking cheap dopamine habits like social media, sugar addictions, junk food, all that stuff, alcohol. And then we work on changing those habits into sustainable, healthier habits that you can stick with long term. And how we do that is we go into the triggers behind the habits. Why are you doing this? How can we change it into something more sustainable? How did this happen? And so on.
Let's sit on this subject for a minute because I think it's an interesting subject and it kind of comes into HR as well. I've noticed of late, as I say, I also interview musicians. There are a plethora of songs being written at the moment by artists about dopamine and sort of the whole dopamine addiction. Ellie Dixon is one of those artists that I don't know whether you've heard of her, but she's created a song recently called "Drowning in Dopamine," and I think, you know, that's where a lot of younger people almost kind of feel this kind of pressure that, you know, their life's being taken away by this desire to constantly getting this hit. Where did this all start? You know, is this not something that's always been there? This kind of desire for dopamine, or is it a real modern phenomenon?
I think that's like a two-part question, because, you know, dopamine is a hormone, or what's called neurotransmitter, that when you trigger it, you feel pleasure. And as you know, the society grows and becomes more modern, we have more access to it. So I think it's always been a problem. And you see, like, alcoholics have always been around, drug addicts have always been around, but the access is more. Social media wasn't a phenomenon in like 100 years ago. It is now. And you get addicted to the likes and the popularity, and you feel wanted, and you feel loved, and you feel all of those, like, you feel desired by the entire world. And it's so easy to like get sucked into that. And it's a good feeling when you feel like you are someone you're meant to, you feel like you're meant to do this, right? And then you pursue that feeling all the time, which you know, can be dangerous. But it's the same thing about sugar. It's the same thing with junk food. It's the same thing with alcohol and drugs. And, you know, there are so many of those cheap dopamine like habits that make you feel the same way. And the feeling is what we want. And we have more money now. We have more accessibility to it. So it's easier to go to McDonald's for lunch every day instead of like bringing from home. You know, when I was growing up, we had McDonald's like once a month. It was Sunday after payday. We could afford, like, it was luxury. It was something that we looked forward to all month. And now we can have junk food every day if we want, all day, every day. Because it's affordable now. We can do it.
It's actually a story that I've been telling fairly regularly. I mean, it's one example of an assessment that I did once with a 19-year-old in a bank over here, where several other ergonomic assessors had been in to see this person, and I identified fairly quickly that this wasn't an straightforward ergonomic problem. It wasn't to do with her environment, etc., but she kept falling asleep at work. And so I asked her about her dietary habits, and she said she ate McDonald's 3 times a day. So she was falling asleep at work. You know, she'd literally eat McDonald's on the way to work because it was on the way. She'd go out and get one at lunch, and then she'd eat one on the way home. And it was kind of like, well, you know, it kind of fits in with lifestyle as well. I just keep going. I don't need to actually stop. I don't need to cook. I don't need to do anything like that. But incredibly dangerous. And you know, but it's almost around that constant desire to be on the go and have a hit. Mm-hmm. Katie, talking about this subject of dopamine, how does that then kind of, or this generation in particular with the social media side of things as well, how has that kind of impacted the way that teams maybe fail to communicate with each other as well? I've seen some incredibly funny sketches online where everybody's in a boardroom and yet they're talking to each other by text. So even though they're sat around the table, they're, you know, it's constantly this.
Well, exactly. And real life examples, you know, one of the clients that I work with, they have this real genuine problem at the moment that because of the hybrid working, you know, there's some of them in the office, there's some of them at home, but there's some of them in the office all on a Teams call, but there's no meeting room for them to go in. So they're then all talking, but they're all sat next to each other, and they're like, it's so frustrating because you can hear the echo of the other person. And so, slightly different, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, there's lots going on I think, to be honest, HR and office spaces are still kind of catching up with this whole social media phenomenon, particularly, people spending all day, every day on their phones and constantly kind of being online. It's something to address. I think, as Gen Z are coming more into the workplace, I think part of me is like they're a bit more savvy about it than maybe I am as a 40-year-old mother of two. But the flip side is they have grown up with this. Like this has always been their reality. So there's no point saying, well, you can't do that, because we all know you can. So it's a balancing act. Yeah, definitely, it's a balancing act, and I completely understand it. From my own use of social media as well. Like I said, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. It's difficult sometimes not to get a bit obsessed about like, oh, this reel didn't do very well, or like, oh, this post only got a few likes, and you kind of like hate yourself for it. But I feel like it's sort of only human nature as well to kind of feel that you're kind of measuring your own performance against that kind of thing.
Yeah, talking about measuring performance, I'll just take Barry's comment that he's brought in here. How many of those in office team meetings are because of managers wanting their employees under their eye? So if they're there, the structure of that, the reason that it's structured in that way is because it's almost micromanagement all of the time.
Yeah, sometimes. I think, again, it depends on the industry and it depends on the company. The company I'm talking about, a lot of the senior management team are in all the time because that's what they prefer, and they prefer the kind of the buzz of being in the office. Whereas other people are much happier with the hybrid approach and only seeing their work colleagues in real life a couple of days a week. So it's definitely been a balancing act over the past couple of years, kind of coming out of the pandemic, of like what the future looked like. But as far as we're concerned, we being, I suppose, HR and general people that support kind of flexible and hybrid working, is that the genie's out of the bottle. We did it. We had to. Yeah. So we all know we can. Having been told, has bolted, you can't put it back in. The horse has bolted, indeed. Having been told for all these years, oh no, you couldn't possibly be flexible. We can't open the floodgates. And then literally in 24 hours, we all had to be flexible and we all had to go home and keep working. Or that was my experience anyway. I still remember jokingly saying to my colleagues, like, see you on the other side of the apocalypse. Yeah. And literally 6 months later, I hadn't seen them all for 6. It was bizarre. Anyway. So I do think there's a lot to be said about culture and how you go about kind of replacing some of that. And I do think that's difficult as well with going back to the sort of social media theme and like everyone's kind of phone addiction, etc., because we're all just so constantly on our phones that even if you are there in real life with people, it is so hard to pull people away from their devices. I don't have any magic answers. I wish I did, but it's a topic that I am, as you can tell, quite passionate about.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. One is, this, which is, oh, but I'm working.
Yes.
Right. Because actually social media has become part of our work as well. And so that's something that actually makes it very difficult to create that dissemination between sort of, I remember like early days of social media when like companies switched off Facebook in the offices and it was like, no, you don't do that in the office. Mm-hmm. But now it's kind of like, yeah, but you need to be seen to be on social media for the business. So it's part of your interaction. It might even be how you're communicating with customers and clients and other stakeholders, etc. Yeah. So there's that element of it, and maybe Cecilie, you can talk about that in a minute. But also, the other thing you said, which I found really interesting, was, and as a parent myself, and as someone that's slightly older, this idea that, well, there's our generation who aren't used to it because we didn't grow up with it, but then there's the younger generation who did grow up with it and they are used to it. I would like to ask Cecile, are they actually used to it? Are they actually coping with it? Because I'm not necessarily sure that they are, or have the actual tools to cope with it properly.
I don't think so, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's just my personal what's it called?
Opinion?
Yes. and also, like, I've done research on this for a few years, and the thing that I've noticed is that they're good at masking it. They're good at pretending to be good at it. Two, they have grown up with it, so they are used to having the devices and using the screens. And when I was in high school and junior high, we were using computers instead of like writing by pen, and I'm sure that's has like grown and evolved since then. And so we are giving them the option and the tools to use the screens, but at the same time, we're not teaching them how to cope without it and how to like turn off, not the devices, but like our brains. Because we do get addicted to it. And I just remember, like, when I was growing up, having like a TV in your room was a big deal, but you had to turn it off like an hour before bed so you could fall asleep, blah, blah, blah. And then you would like sneak up and then turn the TV on with the sound completely off so nobody would hear. But we got caught because, once you turn that TV on, it'll be like frizzy for like at least 15 minutes. And now they can like sneak their phones in. And the second you turn that screen off, it's off. And we'll never know. So it's easier to like work around the same rules that we had when we were kids and when we were younger. So I do think that they are the same level of addicted, if not more. And that's, it does differ from person to person. But it also has a lot to do with how they see us behaving. Are we on our phones all the time? Are we having a TV on in the background for background noise to not feel like alone when we're doing stuff around the house? I remember my mom used to have the radio on. I have the TV on when I do, just out of a bad habit. I don't need it. I don't listen to it, but it's there. So they see how we behave and how we do, and then they act on that because that's what's normal to them. So part of this is, I think, that we need to be more aware of how we approach this and how we do it, and actively show them that we are turning our devices off. And that the rules of the house, the rules that apply to them, also apply to us, because you can't tell that no phones at the table. If we're sat there, I just have to answer this email for work, or I have to like take this call because this is super important. This client can't wait. So I do think the point of the social media, we have to make, working hours are still working hours. We've let that like slip up a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And answer emails at 11 p.m. And, when you have clients all over the world, I'm sure it's not 11 p.m. to them, but I can't be like sat, lying in bed at night, supposed to be asleep, and then, replying to emails and texting back. Yeah. And you have to we have to put those boundaries back in place.
Well, this is half my problem with some of the narrative or some of the rhetoric around things like hybrid working and, sort of flexibility, even with flexibility, which is that it's kind of a juxtaposition. On the one hand, it's kind of a language, and you'll hear companies talking about it in terms of well-being. If we allow our workers to work over here and be more flexible and be able to do this, then that they're not going to burn out. They're going to have a better life. They're going to be able to pick the children up from school and do this as part of their working day, etc. But on the other hand, communication now is such that you're always there. So, it's that creep, isn't it? It's that creep of like, well, actually, when does work start in the morning? If the first thing you do at 6 o'clock in the morning is pick up the phone and start answering emails or replying to those texts, and then the last thing you do at night is sit there and, respond to clients at 11 o'clock. Yeah, okay, you might have the flexibility. Hi, dog. You might have a flexibility. I love dogs. Unfortunately, mine's downstairs at the moment, but normally
put him in a cage to make sure he's not here barking. It doesn't work.
but now he can't. Now he can't eat the postman, so he's upset. But yeah, on the one hand, you have got that flexibility, but on the other hand, you just can't escape, and therefore, is it really like? Is there kind of work-life balance at all? Or is there kind of, or have we actually gone past the point of that? Is it just work-life integration? Is it all just become part of one big thing? And does that mean that actually it's more about people starting to look for roles where in the role they're getting something out of it for their life as well? Do you know what I'm saying by that?
I think I do, because I'm going to say, before I went self-employed, before I started HR Katie, I was working for a business doing in-house HR. And I took the job, even though it was quite a big step down from my previous kind of life as an HR senior manager, because the number one reason was because it worked around school hours, it worked around my life, my other responsibilities, etc. And this is a conversation I've had with quite a lot of other women, that you do end up, and sometimes it's the men. I should say parents, but this is quite often happens to parents. You do end up taking a step down because of the other demands that come in your life. When I was working in that job, and it was pre-pandemic, and it was 9:30 to 2:30 every day, and I was extremely good at switching off, because as soon as I was out the door, I was in mum mode, and I just wasn't thinking about work anymore. And that suited me down to the ground. Once COVID hit, and I said my hilarious "see you on the other side of the apocalypse," turned out I was right. I would spend all day giving people snacks, sorting out lunches, doing this, doing that. Mine were quite little, so we didn't have loads of schoolwork to do, but they couldn't just sort of sit there all day, So I then had a very big bleed of, well, I've hardly done my hours today because I've been so busy running around after them. And then I was working really late into the evenings, and I was working at weekends to try and sort of catch up with everything. And I realised that, like, the whole reason I took this job was never the job itself. It was the hours and the way it suited me. Once that disappeared, I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, this is not right for me. And that is why I sort of took the leap into self-employment, because I thought I could manage it better under my own terms, which, as it turns out, I have been able to. And don't get me wrong, I am also that person that my kids say to me, "Mummy, we're not supposed to have our phones at the table," because I am very naughty at, oh, look, someone's liked something on Instagram, let's go and have a look at that. But for me, it is, it's really difficult to balance it. But I made a very conscious choice to take a job, because I knew I would be able to segregate it. And then as soon as that segregation disappeared, I was like, this is not right. So it's really struggle. It's really
it's a complicated thing. I mean, I'll be completely honest. I've always struggled with it. I mean, ultimately, it's just the way my brain is anyway. So whether I've been employed within a business as an employee, or I've been working for myself, the trouble is I will struggle to switch off. All right. some people want me to get a diagnosis. I don't want to get a diagnosis, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other. That it's kind of innate within me to like just constantly think about it and constantly worry about it. It doesn't really matter whether it's my business or somebody else's business. I've always felt that kind of responsibility. I'm in this role to do this.
Yeah.
This is my responsibility. And actually, the whole self-employed thing, although you get away from perhaps being at the beck and call of your employers, you're still at the beck and call of your customers. And actually, maybe that's, in fact, sometimes worse, because
it's definitely a double-edged sword, because you also get that thing of like, if I'm just sat here, I'm not actually like making any money for myself, so I better actually go and be doing something a bit more productive.
And I'm not making any money from my customers. I mean, that's kind of part of the way you think about it. Let's bring in this question, because I think this is great. And Cecilie, you can obviously help us with this. How do we determine what's our source of the bad kind of dopamine? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a list. Hang on, I'll bring it up. I always forget something off this list. There is a list of like the most common cheap dopamine habits that you can use. But I also think, hang on, the way to find like your own source of cheap dopamine is to look at like write down what you do in a day. Say for a week, write down what you do in a day, write down how you feel. Notice what do you do every time you feel stressed? What do you do every time you feel sad? What do you do every time you feel happy? Notice the patterns and how often you do things. And you probably won't notice what it is until it's like beginning to become an addiction. Or sometimes you even don't understand that it's an addiction until someone tells you like, dude, you eat a lot of sugar. There's like, do you have to hide the Snickers in the bathroom cabinet? Like, there's, mine are in the laundry room. So, there's if you have a dessert like every once in a while, it's not an addiction. If you have to like hide in the kitchen and while you're cooking dinner to like stuff your face with chocolate, you might like start looking into changing that.
Yeah, I always say check people's pockets when you do the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if there's like sweet wrappers or chocolate wrappers in their pockets, that's deliberately not gone in a bin. Right, so they're probably trying to hide the fact that they've eaten it.
The bottom of the backpack.
Good tip.
So the most common habits, I have a list, is alcohol, junk food, social media, drugs, cigarettes, overeating, like all kinds of TV, streaming, binge watching. You sat down for an episode of The Witcher, and all of a sudden it's like Snickers for the win. All of a sudden it's like. Gone 4 hours and you watched an entire season, shopping, excessive spending, gambling, procrastination, thrill seeking, novelty seeking, emotional eating, and porn. And there's also video games is also a common habit, but that's kind of like a double. Yeah, that's kind of like a double. Because not all of these are bad habits. I'm not saying like never eat sugar again, never watch TV again. It's about having like a healthy relationship with these habits. And video games are great for a lot of things. They like teach everyone who's not from like an English speaking country. You gain like English skills. You gain
never thought about that actually. That's brilliant.
Yeah. You get skills in what's somewhat co-working, like acting together.
Teamwork.
There are so many to a lot of these habits. There are a lot of benefits as well, but you do have to like balance it so it's not all
consuming.
Katie, I can see video game workshop days for HR coming in the picture. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? You don't have to necessarily do them; just get groups to do them. It'd be quite.
Pew 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 pew. It's way. Pew pew.
It's quite a list, isn't it? I mean, it's it's amazing actually when as you were reeling that off. It's amazing how many things are there. I'm just going to quickly say, I mean, I do this. And one of the reasons that I've changed my work to do this is a dopamine habit for me. This is, get going on live and doing this sort of thing, which, hopefully I'm quite good at. It's a real dopamine rush for me. I know it is, because that's the other thing about dopamine hits, is that after you do the hit, you feel quite exhausted. That's a big telltale sign. So, I expel a lot of energy, but then I go and have a little break, and then I come back again and I do another one, etc. But for me, that was part and parcel of it, was actually trying to find a way of actually making it part of my work day. So actually, when I get to the end of the day, I can literally go, right, I just need to not do anything now. Let's switch off completely and put a bit of music on and just, relax, because I've expelled that during the day, and it's been productive because it's part of my work. Do you think maybe going forward, other people need to do a little bit more of that? They need to find ways in which to proactively use the dopamine during the day?
Yeah, you could, because there are, the way I say it, this is partly a a concept I've made myself, but I make the distinct divide between cheap dopamine and what I call deep dopamine. And deep dopamine are the dopamine habits that you have that give you dopamine, but you've worked for it. You've actively done something. Because a cheap dopamine habit, it will go spike up and then you go straight down, which is why your 19-year-old client was falling asleep all the time. So what we want is,
it's just basically saying it's so there's a lot of things. It's often something that's bad when overconsumed or overused. Yeah.
So the deep dopamine habits is something that supports. You still get that pleasurable feeling, but you've earned it. It's something you worked for. It's something you've done. It's not like a click on social media from posting a selfie that took you it takes literally a second to snap, or the sugar hits that you get the pleasurable feeling from eating the sugar, and then you drop right down because you haven't earned it. So the deep dopamine habit is something that you do that give you that dopamine feeling, the pleasurable feeling, but it stays.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah. I need to teach you to sing if you don't sing already, because you've got that great voice. And I just think if we could develop that'd be great. I don't want to ignore David's comment, but obviously I feel that this is obviously a real HR question, which maybe I think would probably be better to actually deal with offline.
David, by all means, drop me a DM and we can chat. But it's maybe not quite right for now.
I don't think this is basically asking about a situation at work that happened and perhaps needs a little bit of HR advice. Don't think that's the kind of thing we should cover live on LinkedIn. But thank you for offering that and bringing that up. Is that? I have to ask you though, is that a little bit of an issue for you sometimes, Katie, in the field of work that you're in? That sometimes people just, as you're out and about, go, "Now, Kate, can I just ask you?" I've got this situation at work at the moment.
The amount of times I get text messages from friends being, "Have you got 5 minutes?" And I'm like, "Oh God."
Yeah.
5 minutes. But then what was funny recently was I had a message from my friend's husband who was like, "Oh, can I have a chat to you about work?" And I thought, "Oh, that's weird. He's self-employed now. Like, what's he going to ask me?" But actually, he had a job offer for me, and I was like, "Oh, this is a work conversation I could talk about." But yes. I suppose it's like when you're a doctor or whatever, but people are always like, "Oh, it would be great to pick your brain about this."
I guess we all do it though. I guess we all get that, etc. Yeah. Just let's talk a little bit about that, which is that this is the other thing about, especially about sort of social media and going online with everything these days, which is, do you feel people especially business owners, kind of struggle with where the sort of defining boundaries are in terms of sales in particular as well. Because, on the one hand, we're kind of taught that everything should be social selling. And, it's not about pitching to people. In the good old days, you rocked up and you said to people, this is what I do. Do you want to buy it or not? Nowadays, it's not. It's more about getting to know people, etc. But there's sometimes a difficulty in that you're meant to give value out. But where do you draw the line before it's actually, you're giving away what it is that you're actually good at, and it's kind of where do you stop?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky one because, I knew nothing about marketing or sales or anything like that before I started working for myself. And I've had to kind of learn it all at a very rapid pace. Know, like, and trust, all of that, those great kind of marketing jargon things. But what I did say, I actually strangely did a presentation to some other HR consultants about, because I do a lot of stuff online and I'm quite different to a lot of my other kind of consultants, that I do a lot of my marketing through social media, which is for me, like I said before, I may be slightly addicted anyway, so I'm kind of feeding my own addiction. But what I have said is, and I think this is true of going back to our conversation about like having that line, like separating the line. I said to them, I was like, I'm quite open online. I will chat in my stories on Insta and I share, stories about what's going on. But I was like, I share a very tiny window of my real life with my audience. Like, I don't ever share my kids' faces. I don't ever share my kids' names. I don't ever share my clients' names particularly, unless I'm like, shouting out about something brilliant they've done or whatever. But I haven't ever, if I'm writing a kind of a post about a case study or whatever, I would never name which client that I was dealing with this. So I think, there is this line and people think, oh, well, if I'm on social media, I have to like be out all the time. And you don't, though. You actually don't. Like, there is a window and you can kind of do your own delineation. Like Cecilie was saying, you've got to like kind of draw the lines for yourself to know, like, this is where I'm going over the line with the dopamine and wanting everyone, if you're going completely laying your soul bare and you want everyone to like comment. If you're doing it just for that, that's when you've like crossed a bit of a line, in my opinion. Like I said, I should always caveat that this is my opinion. But then, the flip
Is
side.
And with that, and I think kind of pulling it into your side as well about the sort of dopamine side of things. One of the things I talk to clients about is don't do content, do activity. And what I mean by that is everybody's racing to put content out. All right. Everybody's racing to put another thing up into the ether and fill that space which is there, which, if you don't fill it, somebody else is going to fill it and somebody else is going to, grab that space. But, ultimately what that ends up looking like for a lot of us as onlookers of that is the same old stuff over there. It's actually quite boring because everybody's just filling space. And whereas I really try and encourage clients to live and have a proper active objective with their business. So, the first thing I always start by saying is, what is it that you're actually wanting to achieve in the world, right? Because you ain't going to achieve that, like it or lump it. You're not going to achieve that just by being online, right? And it might seem that way because you look at the likes of, let's take musicians, but you look at the likes of someone like Ed Sheeran online or whatever, and he's like everywhere, and he's always online, and there's all of this material, but that material only happens because he's doing stuff, right? He's playing places and he's recording albums. So the activity generates the content. It's not the other way around. It's not, if I produce lots of content and chuck it up there, that then work will suddenly happen or whatever. Do you think actually part and parcel of this is people need to get back to actually doing what they really want to be doing in the world, and actually, you know, maybe even sometimes handing over the social media to someone to just report on it, you know, become journalistic with it and give it to somebody else to say, right, this is what I'm going to be doing this week. This is, you know, you pick the best bits of it, the snapshots, and you put it out to the world. But actually, I'm going to get on with doing stuff. Yeah. That releases me to really achieve what I want to achieve. Is that a helpful way of looking at it?
You're asking me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah, I think that so. And if you've seen like some of what I've been saying online, it's I talk a lot about getting your sleep in, have a proper morning routine, not like just get up and then roll over to your desk on the side of your bed, you know, to start working at once. You do like a proper morning routine, eat proteins, drink a lot of water, get outside, move your body, get sunlight and fresh air, and do all of that stuff, and then make your workday fit into that. And you have to, you know, there are a lot of like hacks and tips and tricks, and it's not possible to do everything. You'll burn out so fast. And not everything works out for everyone. If you're a single parent, you can't go on 5 a.m. runs, you know, in the woods somewhere. If you have like structure and responsibilities, make it work around it. You can't do everything, but you can do a little bit. Start by getting enough sleep. Start by drinking enough water. One of the things I've noticed after I started doing this is people are surprised by how much water you need to drink in a day.
Lots.
Yeah, it's lots, 64 ounces.
Yeah.
And that's just like another 32 ounces for every hour you work out, another 32 ounces for every like 10 degrees the weather turns warmer. Wow. So, you know, like if you're working out in the middle of the summer, you do need to drink a bit of water. And I also noticed that people aren't paying attention to how they eat and what they eat and how that like affects our bodies and our brains, and how like we do during the day. So we do go to McDonald's for lunch, and then we have like that slump within an hour after eating. So I do think it's important to like take a step back, look at what we used to be doing, what were we like taught as children. Look at, you know, don't like rush into everything. I always say that rest is productive, because you do have to like take a step back, breathe, and then, you know, let it, you know, simmer. Because if your brain is on all the time, if you're wired all the time, if you're like always thinking about the next step, you don't have time to process what's already happened. You've got
to find some time to process.
You do.
Absolutely.
If you're not even sleeping.
Yeah. Even me. And that's difficult, because my mind goes at 100 miles an hour. But even me, I have to find some time to process. You have to find some time to sort of re-look at what you've done as well, and disseminate what was good about it, what wasn't good about it, etc. Katie, what's one of the main things that you're seeing in terms of, I mean, obviously this show's about well-being and etc. within the workplace. What's one of the main areas of concern for you as an HR person at the moment in terms of well-being in the workplace?
Well, it is sort of what we've kind of touched on, but it is that kind of like the stress and the sort of potential burnout of just sort of always being on, always being available, never switching off. And I do think that is a real concern. And it's really interesting as well, what Cecilie was saying about rest, because again, that's something that I struggle with, and a lot of people struggle with, like not feeling guilty. And I've seen actually like a reel or a meme or something, and it was this thing of like, you know, the pouring the water into and it's like, how are you supposed to fill everyone else's cup if your cup is empty? And it's just in a way sounds very trite, but actually when you stop and think about it, it's so true, because I know I'm a very sociable person. You don't really get into HR if you don't like people. I mean, you could, but it would be quite hard work. But I know that my cup feels a lot fuller when I've had a nice dinner with some friends, or I've had some quality time with my family. So it's about what is your rest. Doesn't have to be just sat on the sofa with your feet up watching TV. What does your rest look like? What is your way of filling your cup, basically? And then so working with employers to sort of help them understand that, like, you can't enforce this kind of like one rule, and again, sorry, I'm slightly going around in circles here, but this is like the irony of flexible working, because when you put in a flexible working request in this country, you are basically making a permanent change to your terms and conditions, and it's completely unflexible, frankly, because you're saying you want to shorten your hours or change your days or something like that. Hybrid working by its nature is probably a bit more flexible, because you've got the sort of the office and the home based. But again, sometimes we need to kind of like pull back on what's sort of achievable and what's realistic. Because actually I was talking to a client / friend about this just the other week. They were talking to someone who said, oh, well, I'm part-time at the moment, but you're flexible, so I could be full-time. Exactly. That was what I did. That's what I did as well. So it's like, no, like you still have to like, so do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes these expectations need a little bit of shifting. But
I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of confusion over the semantics around different types of working. I think the trouble is that companies have tried to use new terminology and be quite prescriptive with it and say, well, actually this means this, whereas actually for another organisation it means something completely different. So what one organisation sees as hybrid, another organisation wouldn't agree with that at all. And I'll reference people to another podcast that I've done recently with Freddie Gilmore and Nicola Pease. Do check that one out if you haven't already, where we actually did talk about the definition of hybrid, and they offer some really good insight into perhaps what it really should mean, as opposed to what a lot of companies have made it out to be. I want to ask you both before we go, because obviously we talk a lot on this show. Sometimes we have people from within the ergonomic sector, and we the last couple of weeks we've had that, and one of the main things we've been talking about is there's definitely within our sector a move away from, or feeling that there should be a move away from just sort of tick box exercises when it comes to health and well-being. The DSE, display screen equipment regs, and the need to do a regular DSE assessment with staff has been there for years. It hasn't changed very much. Early 2000s, last time there was a change, and yet all of our tech and the way we work has changed drastically. We now work in very different ways. One of the things we've been talking about is maybe actually what companies need to do is shift away from doing a kind of tick box, how are you sitting at your desk? Is it like this? To more of an educational model, where actually it's more about, let's educate individuals within businesses. Let's actually give them the tools themselves to, firstly, recognize when there's an issue. And secondly, maybe, depending upon where they are working, because it might be a coffee shop, it might be at home, it might be in an office or whatever, know how to maybe start to go about sorting that out for themselves, or at least know where to then perhaps turn to get additional advice. Do you think that's a sensible approach? Anybody?
I think so. And I think that is something that I feel like applies in a lot of professions, not just ergonomics. I think that knowledge is power. If you know what is happening and how to deal with it or fix it or however you want to say it, we can, move in a direction where not everything is like sorted with pills and medication and easy fixes.
Yeah, a really good example of this, and it happens all of the time. I was tagged into a post last week. Somebody on LinkedIn, put a post out saying, I've been self-employed now for a couple of years. I'm working from home, etc. I've got really bad backache. I've got, I've actually been to a doctor. I've been diagnosed with a condition, etc. I need a better chair. Who can help? And the trouble is, everybody from our profession will look at that and go, "Oh my goodness, no," because the problem of it is you can't solve these things by just saying, "Well, what you need is this chair." Mm-hmm. There's more information, and everybody that's in a business will understand, or in a sector will understand this. Sometimes you can't just give an answer. You have to give more information first, unless you actually understand exactly how that person's working, what environment they're working in, how, what their day looks like, what their task looks like, how are they doing this to then this, etc. What the medical what the medical team have said about this, how it affects them, where in their back it, that all of that information for a qualified assessor will enable a qualified assessor to then say, right, the best recommendation for you is this. And it might not just be about a chair. It might be, well, like, you need to take regular breaks, and you need to move this to here, and you need to incorporate this as part of your day. And yet we seem to just try and go for like, oh, help me out. What can I buy? Where can I get it on Amazon? Other online shops are available. But that's the trouble, that we've come to think that we can just buy everything online and just solve it in a matter of minutes, but we can't, can we? We need more help and advice than that. Katie?
Yeah, I think we can try to help people, help themselves. But I have been, I have an app called Headspace that I use to help me sleep. In particular, like, it's for meditation and things, but I find the sleep stories particularly helpful for getting me to sleep. So, like, I've learned that those are good for me because they help me switch my brain off. So again, it's sometimes about just like giving people some tools, giving people some guidance, spotting the signs. Giving people what they can do.
Yeah, Philip Johnson's training and giving people the understanding that they can do things to help themselves. Absolutely. It's
exactly. Yeah. So that's like what a lot of what we're doing at the moment is trying to like get people actually engaged in the conversation, how they can do it themselves, like what we can do to support them. Sure. But, it's that whole thing of like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can get people these apps, you can get them the right chair, etc. But if they're not doing all of the other exercises around it, it's not going to get any better. The bad back thing is a great example. I used to have a really bad back. I used to have these shooting pains. Went to physio. He said, actually, what you need to do is get stronger legs and stronger core, and then that will help your back because you're putting too much pressure through your back. Lo and behold, I now do weight training and I don't have back problems anymore.
It might not
lift much heavier things, but it's because I've strengthened the right areas and I don't damage my back anymore. So it's very much,
it's not always a piece of kit. It's not always just sold by a piece of kit. No, absolutely.
Now realizing you have to do the uncomfortable steps to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. It's not an
you
immediate.
You have to do the uncomfortable. We don't want to be uncomfortable anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, yes, you do have to take the painkillers or you do have to take the antidepressants, but there are times that you can use tools on your own to help you support those and, work alongside them even. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And I think that's something that we all kind of need to acknowledge as well, that like it's not black and white, and it's not one or the other. You don't have to, if you're taking medication, you don't have to stop doing meditation or alternative therapies. Like, they all can work together. So yeah, totally, it's about arming people with knowledge, giving them options, giving them the opportunity, and then the opportunity to talk about it as well.
And it's one of the reasons we like to get people from different sectors on this show, so that we stop that kind of siloing that sometimes happens, where like this section of the society is doing this sector is doing that.
Yeah. Give it to occupational health. It's nothing to do with us. It's like, yeah.
No, it's one of my big beliefs in life, which is that if we start to bring people of different disciplines together and start to understand a little bit about how we can all feed into helping people, then we have a better knowledge, and we can signpost people to the right people, and we can get people the support and the help when they need it, which is why you're both here today. Thank you so much. You see, an hour goes just like that. It's amazing, isn't it? Now, thank you for coming on today. You both will receive a prize. Yes,
this
absolutely.
Is brand new information.
Oh, it's brand new information. Well, there you go. So what we'd like you to do before the end of the week, please, if Katie and Cecilie, if you could send me a photograph of your workstation as it is in front of you at the moment. We won't ask you to display that to all and sundry.
As it is at the moment. Oh dear.
It doesn't really matter, because no one else is going to see it. We will send that over to Stephen, who isn't here today, but will be watching this on return. And if we can send you something from back at Elkhuizen that will help with your ergonomic setup, we will do that. Okay.
Amazing.
I hope you take that as a little thank you from us for coming on today. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed it. It's yet another week of Wow Ergonomics. Every week completely different. Every week we always learn something new. If you'd like to know more or find out what's been in the past on some of these episodes, you can go to the little microsite that we set up at wowergonomics.com. There you can pick up on this via Spotify if you like to drive and listen, or if you want to watch the videos, they're all there as well. Until next time, thanks to both my guests, Katie and Cecile, and take care out there. Have a good week. Look after yourselves. Bye for now.